South Africa really is a remarkable country, laden with potential, but we really need to deliver economic growth and job creation, and quickly, as was evidenced by the recent social unrest. So how do we do that? And I was actually bemoaning the state of the South African economy recently and the outlook for the country, given the tepid effectiveness of government so far and the economic reforms. And a friend of mine just said to me, so what are you doing about it? And I think that's really the ethos of South Africa, is to roll up your sleeves and actually do something about the situation. My next guest is certainly doing that, putting the politics and the macro conditions of this pandemic world that we live in to one side and actually doing something about it. And there have been for some time. Alison Collier is Managing Director of Endeavour South Africa. And Alison, you do such incredible work. It's a great pleasure to have you on the platform. Endeavour is a global model, and I think Endeavour South Africa opened its doors back in the mid-2000s. Just tell us a little bit more about Endeavour South Africa. What do you do and what your goals are?
Sure, and I must say I couldn't agree with you more in the statement that entrepreneurs, they really are the key drivers of employment, job creation, and revenue growth in markets. So what does Endeavour do globally and in South Africa, and what are our goals? So Endeavour, it's a mission-driven organization that's here to really support the high-growth entrepreneurs, so the medium-sized, high-impact entrepreneurs that are going out and making the most change, their market-leading positions in their local markets, and they've got the ability to grow into the international markets, solving international problems. And most importantly, these businesses are businesses that are incredibly commercially viable, but also they've got they're founder-led, and they've got a pay-it-forward mindset, the founders. So they're in there to build great businesses, to create employment, to drive revenue growth, but at the same time, to really multiply their impact. So sharing their learnings with up-and-coming entrepreneurs, and also reinvesting their wealth back into up-and-coming entrepreneurs, creating a virtuous cycle. So Endeavour, it's like you said, it's a global organization founded in New York in the early 2000s. We're now present in 40 different markets globally. South Africa opened in 2004. And really, what is the asset that Endeavour offers towards the entrepreneurs that are part of our network? So Endeavour, it's made up of a global mentor network base of over 5,000 mentors. They're probably about 150, or there are 154 here in South Africa. But what really sets Endeavour apart is the caliber of the mentors that sit in this network, and also that this network is global. So, for example, in South Africa, Adrian Gore is the founding chairman, and he opened the South Africa office together with the likes of Dave Frankel, Paul Harris, Isaac Shongwe. And since then, Herman Bosman has taken on the chairman role here in South Africa, and globally the caliber matches this. So our global board includes the likes of Reid Hoffman, co-founder of LinkedIn, some of the top names of the US VC network. And in addition to the strong global mentor network we've got, Endeavour's got an incredible investor network globally too. So we work with over 500 VCs internationally. All of the top names that you want to call out in the US, the Asia markets, and Europe markets, we're very fortunate. We work with them. So Sequoia and Andreessen and the like, and then in the European markets, Balderton, etc. Tiger Global and SoftBank are just a few others. But when you've got a network of mentors who are working on a pro bono basis and keen and willing to open doors for up-and-coming entrepreneurs, to get them in front of the right people, to have the right conversations, it just really catapults those businesses to get into the markets that they're looking to get into. And Endeavour's really keen to play the role to bridge the gap between the local markets and the international markets, where you can really accelerate and dramatically grow your revenue lines. So what's our goal in South Africa? Here in South Africa, we over the last 2.5, 3 years, we've supported 30 teams actively, and another sort of 50 or 60 on an active basis, but they're not yet Endeavour entrepreneurs. That process takes probably about 9 months to 18 months. It's a very rigorous selection process. But if you look at the performance, what of these 30 entrepreneurs that here in the South African market that we've supported have delivered, they've created an additional 2.6 billion rand in revenue. So that's growing at an average of close to 80% each year in their revenue growth. And they're large businesses. So the average revenue is around 200 million. over and above that, what's most exciting is the job creation figures. So they're running at about an average of 27% job growth a year. So they've created more than 4,000 jobs, just these 30 businesses alone in the past 2 years. And what's very exciting is that these jobs are predominantly Black South Africans. So more than 75% of the jobs that these, fast-growing, medium-sized, tech-enabled businesses are creating are driving transformation at the same time.
Yeah,
and
it's
over and above
model.
that, I mean, the model really works, and it is completely based on the pro bono mentorship that the entrepreneurs receive from the global mentor base that I've just expressed, but then over and above that, from the entrepreneurs in the network who are highly successful, who are helping those that are coming after them 6 months, a year, or 2 years. So it's really all about multiplying the knowledge and the learnings and the wealth and reinvesting those into the up and coming generations. And it's the most impressive thing that I find is the more senior the individuals are in the mentor network, the more generously and openly they give of their time to the up and coming entrepreneurs. It's very impressive to see, and I want to say it's wonderfully exciting to see the growth. Like, these businesses are growing at an exceptional pace, attracting an incredible amount of capital and really creating jobs in a very sustainable manner.
Yeah, and it does show you when you target the interventions at that level of mentorship to individuals who are naturally entrepreneurial, who build things, who are creators, which is what they can do with that. And that network is so powerful. I've been trying to get Roelof Botha of Sequoia Capital onto the show, and there are gatekeepers if you want to pitch at that level. So to be able to tap into that network is supremely powerful. If you look at the impact that Endeavour South Africa has had on the entrepreneurial ecosystem in South Africa. And what I like about what you do is it really does take an ecosystem approach, starting with the impact that you've had on startup and scale-ups. What would you say is some of the key impacts that you've had so far?
Sure. So for what we see as being the key impacts that we're having in the local market is primarily really elevating the understanding of what scale-ups, startups, and these tech-enabled entrepreneurs can really do and deliver in the market. And I want to say, I think the SA SME Fund is also doing an exceptionally great job on those significant amount of jobs that these businesses create, and also the jobs that they're creating and the problems that they're solving in the digital space, and their problems the solutions are more productive than the solutions that we've got today. So these jobs and these businesses are here to stay. And it's really creating that awareness. And through that, you get all of the investors crowding in because they're keen to be part of this sector, which is generating interesting and excess returns. Likewise, you as an individual, wonderful to be part of a growing sector in the market, and one that's going to be delivering very exciting revenue growth and international opportunities. So it's really elevating the position and understanding of what this entrepreneurial sector can offer you as an individual or an investor, and then through that you get a snowball effect with the sector growing.
Now, you spoke a little bit about the investors there, but the impact that you see the Endeavour SA model having from an investor, almost a VC capital perspective, and other stakeholders, is this deepening the pool of available VC resources out there? And I think an important component of that is, with the mindset of paying it forward. So often in that very early stage, almost angel investing stage, we do see successful entrepreneurs seeding other successful entrepreneurs, and really that becomes a very powerful engine of future growth. How do you see your impact in that particular space?
No, I want to say, great question, and it's definitely the lack of liquidity in the early stages of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in South Africa is very real. So two things that Endeavour is specifically doing in that space. One is sort of what we've been doing for a number of years, but we just have really doubled down on it because of the point that you've raised. So what we have specifically set out to do for the past year is to really bridge the gap in the relationships between the South Africa VCs and the international VCs. Through Endeavour's global network, we're really well connected with the international VCs, and the international VC market is much more developed and sophisticated and got much more liquidity than the South African market. So, if the South Africa VCs had got deep and strong relationships with the international VCs, they'd be the businesses that our South Africa VCs had invested in here in South Africa would naturally be able to get follow-on capital much more easily through a trusted VC network. So what we're looking to do is to really increase the ties between our South Africa VC market and the international VC market along the different vertical lines. And I want to say it's going well, and we're seeing lots of increased interest from the international VCs into the South African market, as well as into other African markets. It's also, there's some macros that are playing into that, but I want to say it definitely helps. It's all built on trust and relationships when you're co-investing. So one is that piece, and then the second is that here, earlier this year, we launched our first co-investment fund. And what is that fund here to do? It's here to support and close that gap that you've spoken about, the liquidity gap, to invest in rounds, anything from 20 million rand and up, for the entrepreneurs that are in Endeavour's ecosystem that we're already supporting. And it's a co-investment fund. So Endeavour doesn't lead the rounds. So what does that mean? We rely on an investor, typically an investor in our local market. It could also be an international market, to lead that round. So a lot of the work that our team does is looking to find the best capital provider or VC provider for that specific entrepreneur, for the growth stage that they're at, as well as the size of their business and the market that they're playing in, to lead the round, so they can get the best strategic support from the VC investor on their cap table, and then we'll come in behind that VC investor with some extra cash. But we won't be there alone in the round, and it's a small check that we write. It's between 3 million and 10 million rand, so it's not going to squeeze out the local VC or the international investor who's looking to invest in the round, but rather support the entrepreneur and the investor to close the round earlier, and to ensure that we get the right VCs, whether they're local or international, onto the entrepreneur's cap table.
So important to catalyze that type of transaction. And then I spoke to you earlier on in the year about your local scale-up program as well, which is also in partnership with the SA SME Fund. But I'd like to get your view on, because you've been involved in the ecosystem for such a long time, and you can give us that kind of evolutionary perspective. What are some of the changes that you've observed in the entrepreneurship and the VC scene over the last year? Maybe we can start internationally, because I think COVID has just turned everything upside down, and then come down into Africa and then South Africa.
Sure, and I think a great question, and it's almost like there couldn't be a more exciting time to be working in this space in South Africa or Africa. So globally, what are we seeing? Well, there's this incredible amount of capital that's available, and this capital is really, the investors are really looking to invest that capital more into the private markets than only in the public markets. So we're seeing a huge increase in the amount of interest internationally in the VC market from all of the big players in the investment space. In addition, we're seeing that the top VCs in the world, who are only ever getting involved in a Series B or even only a Series C round, they're starting to invest earlier in the Series A rounds, and sometimes even sooner. And we're seeing this first in Latin America. I mean, the trends here in Africa always follow what's been going on in LATAM, so it'll come but a little bit later here. But with this increased flow of capital into this sector, there's a huge improvement in the liquidity, which means that the entrepreneurs that are building businesses in this space suddenly have access to a much bigger pool of capital that will then be financing their business and financing their growth, and so they can accelerate the growth plans that they have. And we're seeing that, globally, but also in Africa. I think we're seeing that in fintech. You would have seen the number of big transactions that got been in the headlines this year. Nigeria's been in a few, but also in South Africa. I mean, on the discussion you mentioned in March this year, Melvin Luberger was on that panel from Go1. Yes. He and Andrew Barnes, an Australian, co-founded that business. And that EdTech has since become a unicorn. And that happened in June and July this year with a round that SoftBank led. They raised 200 million from SoftBank and got an over $1 billion valuation and that's unheard of. I mean, that's the first business that's been co-founded by a South African that's, that's now a unicorn. It's really exciting. In Egypt, 2 weeks ago, there was a unicorn that was announced there. We've had 2 other unicorns this year in Africa. So the trend is happening. And once you have success stories like that are happening more and more frequently, 1 in Africa, and 2 starting to get examples in South Africa, suddenly it really catches the attention, both of the entrepreneurs and the investors. Yeah. And people really see that there is an incredible commercial opportunity through setting up a tech-enabled business here if you really get it right. So I want to say, for me, that it's really exciting to see that, and the more role models or examples we have like that, the better. And there's an incredible set of entrepreneurs that we work with that I think are very close to those levels. They've got a little bit more to go, but the growth that some of the fintech businesses and SaaS businesses we've been working with over the past 2 years, some of them have grown more than 300%. Over this period of COVID, driven by this accelerated digitization, and there's no going back. I mean, the trend is here to stay, and those businesses are now, they've got access to the global markets like they never had before because of the just broad acceptance of remote working. So it's, I think, very exciting, and I think we're going to see more and more international capital being interested in these opportunities in Africa and South Africa as we see more and more success stories. It's not saying every business is going to be a success, but people will really understand what the potential opportunity is.
Yeah, we often like to navel gaze in South Africa, and I think sometimes don't realize where our strengths lie. I was chatting to the CEO of Pineapple the other day. He says whenever he goes to an international insurtech conference, South Africans are held up as being at the very cutting edge of financial insurtech, all of these new technologies that we talk about, and really it is an exciting time to be involved with that. How is that changing VC or investment appetite for South Africa's entrepreneurs, and most specifically those tech-enabled scale-up type entrepreneurs? Do you think perhaps the pandemic has de-risked that conversation to an extent?
I think I would say yes. And why? It's de-risked because the opportunity has become so much more real and so much closer. So what we're seeing, I mean, if we just talk numbers when it comes to capital, the capital, so in South Africa we say work as Endeavour with roughly about 100 businesses. 30 of those businesses have passed our the rigorous selection process, the international selection panel. Those 30 businesses, they all look to raise capital to drive their growth. In 2019, those businesses raised collectively 700 million rand. In 2020, collectively they raised 2 billion. This year, it looks like they're going to raise more than 5 billion. So coming back to your question, like what's driving this sudden acceleration of the capital that these businesses are able to raise? They're fundamentally not they're not completely different businesses to what they were 2 years ago, but rather the market is seeing the opportunity that they are able to deliver on is so much closer to reality. So they're now, because we can work remotely, because you can do so much more from a distance so effectively, and because the adoption is so much higher from businesses and from the consumers to the different tech solutions. So the market and the investors have recognized that, and they're willing to write big checks at a much earlier stage because of this increased opportunity. And the market is truly global for these tech-enabled businesses. And South Africa has got an incredibly highly skilled set of tech developers. We haven't got enough, but those that we have are incredibly skilled. I want to say Peter de Villiers and Clickatel, along with Texit and CIT, they are doing incredible work in enhancing and deepening and broadening the digital skills. But the market is truly global for these tech-enabled businesses. And those medium-sized businesses, entrepreneurs, through COVID, through a pandemic, entrepreneurs thrive because they thrive in change. They're nimble, and they have got the wherewithal and the resources to modify their solution to best fit the market, or partner with others to better meet the customer's needs. And I want to say they've done that exceptionally well. The portfolio that we work with, and are delivering on that in spades. It's very exciting.
Now, speaking of the portfolio you work with, you've recently launched a VC fund. Tell us a little bit more about this. Where
Yes.
is it going to be playing and how it's supporting your mission as Endeavour?
Sure. So that really comes back to a little bit of the earlier discussion that we had. So what is the Harvest Fund that we've launched looking to do in the South Africa entrepreneurial ecosystem? It's really looking to play in the very early stage of the investment space. So from the seed through to the early growth stage where we see the market being quite illiquid, and it's a co-investment fund. So it's not a fund that will go out and lead a transaction. And so with that, it's the first of its kind in one, South Africa, and two, to Africa. And because we as co-investment fund, it's in our interest as Endeavour to go out and really find the best VC to lead that round, to support the entrepreneurs' growth here in the local market and internationally. So we do a lot of work with entrepreneur to find the best VC to support leading that round, and then we'll come in behind that lead investor, and through that look to significantly reduce the amount of time that the business is spending capital raising, so they can focus on growing their business, and also plug a hole in where we see the market's particularly illiquid, which is in the early seed stage to the Series A stage in the local market. And we're doing that with a small check because we're not wanting to take away any of the returns that the VC market are looking to gain for themselves, but rather to complement that and then bring our pro bono mentor network to really support that entrepreneur as they're growing locally here and internationally.
It's almost like mezzanine funding for VCs, just plugging that gap, as you say, not leading the round, but just being able to get that transaction over the line with that input. Now, you explained the key role that scale-ups or fast-growing, medium-sized businesses are playing in the economy and in driving job creation and transformation and revenue growth and all of those good things. Given where we find ourselves in the country at the moment, our dire unemployment, our relatively low growth economy, what needs to be done to ensure that we've got a thriving high growth scale up sector to help reverse this trend?
So I want to say there are a few things, and I think some of them we're already doing as a country and the different stakeholders, and some of them we can do a lot more of. So I want to say, like, for example, increasing the liquidity. So what we're seeing already from the international markets that's been driven by macros, we're seeing a huge increase in the liquidity into our South Africa VC market and the entrepreneurial space. But what I want to say is in South Africa, we've got such an incredibly sophisticated financial sector and investment sector. And if we can just look to have some of those funds that are the pension funds or the bigger asset classes to have an increased allowance for those funds to be invested into VC, which is the sector that's really creating jobs, driving productive new businesses, I think that would make an absolutely massive difference. If it's only just 1 or 2%, the numbers that are invested in that space in South Africa are mammoth. So if you just get a small slice being shifted into the VC asset class, there would be, I want to say, an explosion of entrepreneurial activity just with the increased local investment. And I think that'll have a much bigger impact than the reversing of what we will see from the reversing of 12J. Yeah. So it's and I also think the increased international flows that we've seen in the short term in deals in the tech-enabled businesses we work with is the international flows are more than picking up that delta, which is a relief. But there's definitely more space to come.
On that point, and just before you go into your next point, no, that's fine. I'm interrupting you. I just, often when I chat to Keert van Zyl or Justin Stanford, well-known VCs in South Africa, the big challenge for them has always been exits. And investors want to see successful exits. Are we getting to that point? There have been some very high-profile successful exits of late. WizPass, I think, is the one that springs to mind most recently, being sold to FM Systems Global. Are we starting to see that as an obstacle start to crumble now as well?
So I want to say yes. And yes, two reasons. One, the exits, I mean, maybe you don't call it an exit, but if you're a co-founder of a business that's been received a $200 million check that's made you a $1 billion business, yes, it's not an exit per se, but you're getting very, very close. And that's Go1, co-founded by a South African. Then, I mean, we can go through a list of a number of others, but yes, exits are always something that people look for. We've seen 5 big transactions that have happened in Africa this year alone. And when I say big transactions, like the businesses are now valued at unicorn status or very close to that. So Stripe purchase of the business in Nigeria. We've seen Paystack, DPO. So there are a number of transactions that are showing more and more of this trend. There's still more to come. So we're definitely not there yet, but we're going to see a good few more transactions, I think, before this year is out. And then that question of exits, I think, will start to, won't be there as often. It'll still be there. So it still will come for a while. But just back to your question of what else we need to do to help to make the sector thrive, is I think what we're seeing from corporates is really, it's very impressive. Lots of the corporates now are stepping up and saying we're having entrepreneurial programs. Yes, we've got ESD programs, but we also now wanting to support entrepreneurial programs in this high growth space. These businesses that are creating, a huge amount of jobs, driving significant revenue growth, not just thinking about businesses that are below the 50 million rand annual revenue mark, which sits in the ESD spend. So the JSE has launched a program that we're running with them for the next 2 or 3 years, looking at really fostering high growth entrepreneurship, giving them on-demand tailored business mentoring through our Endeavour network. Likewise, we're running a similar program with F&B, supporting a cohort of 10 Black founder-led businesses that are also playing in this tech-enabled high-growth space, and more corporates that step up and start corporate VC funds. There are many examples of that have happened in the last 18 months in South Africa. We need more of these type of programs that the JSE, F&B, and others are running. I want to say the SME Fund's presence in this space, and we're working with them on the local scale-up program, which is really the Endeavour selection process, but making that much more cohort-based and much more rigorous support that we're providing through to those businesses. If we have more of that type of activity, so you'll see many more entrepreneurial businesses getting the support that they need in the early stages when they actually are not in a position to finance that type of support for themselves. There are a few things that would really make a difference policy-wise, but I want to say, I think if we start talking policy, we'll just get stuck. So we just have to know what the rules are and play with, what we can do within the rules. And if the policies do get amended one day, well, great, there'll be a lot more activity. But I think, we just need to go and focus on what we can do. And there's more than enough space for the tech-enabled businesses that are high growth to thrive.
Absolutely. Entrepreneurs never get stuck in the policy paralysis debate. Now, what should businesses and entrepreneurs be doing right now to come out of the pandemic? As we see, our vaccine rollout program is really entering into impressive high gear. 400,000 a day is the target, according to B4SA and Nicholas Crisp in the Department of Health. And I think business and the private and government and the private sector have found each other finally. It's working really well. So we do hope that we can finally have a post-pandemic discussion 6 months down the line where everyone's got their jabs in arms. What should businesses and entrepreneurs be doing right now to get out of the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it really comes back to a lot of what you spoke about, sounds like, with the MD from Pineapple, is really just focusing on what you're good at as an entrepreneur. So really knowing and understanding the South Africa landscape and what the advantages are that South Africa has relative to the rest of the world, appreciating what the digitalization trend means for us in South Africa, for the world, and then you as an entrepreneur. I mean, I want to say it's now, the global opportunity is there for the taking now more than ever. And if you're a tech-enabled business and you've got your business based in South Africa and you're truly solving a global problem, you've got an incredibly skilled but low-cost base. The global market is closer to you than it ever was before. Let's not be naive. You need to know, you need people in your team who know exactly how to sell to those international customers and how the market works. But it's at a much lower cost base, and you can reach those markets in a much shorter space of time than what you could reach them before. The other thing I want to call out is what you mentioned also earlier in our discussion is some of the advantages that South Africa has globally. So one is we've got an incredibly sophisticated financial market. We've got some of the strongest and biggest corporates here that would play in a similar fashion in any market in the world. So what does that mean for you as an entrepreneur that sets up your business in South Africa? You've got an incredible test bed, but just always know that you're building your product or your solution for the global market. But what could be better than having a wonderful low-cost base where to test your solution, pay all your school fees here, and then take your solution internationally once you've solved the product market fit. You know what your go-to-market needs to be, and I think the resilience of South Africans and our problem-solving skills, it's unsurpassable in the world. I mean, it's how you have to be day to day in our country, but in a changing environment, it's such an incredibly powerful skill to have with you, and it's something that'll see the South African entrepreneurs. They definitely make incredible use of that skill, and the resilience of South Africans is incredibly impressive to see. The last point I want to make is on governance, and that's something that I want to say plays two ways. So we've got great corporate governance in South Africa, especially if you compare us to the other markets in Africa. So what does that mean? It does really two things. One, I think when you're talking about pricing of rounds, it means that the pricing of rounds here in South Africa are relatively more conservative than the prices that you're going to see of these businesses in the other markets. But on the other hand, it really means that there's and understand exactly what's happening in that business. There's great governance. You can trust that business, and there's a great set of foundations, which really stands the entrepreneurs in good stead. I want to say sometimes the pricing discussions really hurt because you don't get the valuations that you could get in other markets, but you're playing a long game. And so at the end of the day, having good corporate governance, which South Africa has, really stands the business in great stead for the international market expansions. So
I think some super strengths. Much like our rugby, it reminded me that the rest of the world likes to call the Springboks boring. But what the Springboks are is incredibly efficient and resilient. And we've had to deal with challenges and come out on top of the world time and time again. And we're seeing South African entrepreneurs do the same thing. Alison Collier, MD of Endeavour South Africa, thank you so much. As I said in the beginning, you do such incredibly important work and you do it so well. So all power to your elbow with the new fund and for continuing to find the next unicorn to help build this entrepreneurial ecosystem in South Africa. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Michael. Pleasure to be here.